Hey guys, before I start this video, I wanted to say, I'm always curious what time my viewers watch these stories from all over the world. What time is it where you are right now?
They said the girl in the valley could whisper to fire. Cassian Drayke didn't believe such things. Not until he saw her. She stood in the middle of a mist-soaked field as his horse approached, the wind tugging at her ash-blonde hair. Her dress, pale blue and torn at the hem, rippled like smoke. When she turned, the faintest shimmer passed over her eyes. Not from sunlight, but something older, something wrong. "Are you the Count's man?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but her posture wasn't. One hand rested at her side, close to the dagger hidden in her sleeve. Cassian stopped several paces away, his dark cloak brushing against his boots. "Cassian Drayke, I was sent to bring you to the capital. I didn't ask to be brought anywhere. I didn't ask to be sent," he replied evenly. A small pause. Then, the ghost of a smirk tugged at her mouth. "Then we're both prisoners of duty." He almost smiled. Almost. Her name was Elena Wynne, though that name didn't belong to her by blood. He didn't know that yet. To him, she was just a young woman from a forgotten valley, the ward of the Count, meant to be kept safe for reasons no one had bothered to explain. But there was something about her the countryside whispered about. Stories of a girl who survived the fever that took her entire village, who healed a horse with a touch, who never seemed to age past her mid-20s no matter how many years passed. Cassian didn't believe rumors. He believed in swords, commands, and clean orders. Yet the moment he met her eyes, some part of him, the buried human part, hesitated. "Gather what you need," he said finally. "We leave before nightfall. I have nothing worth carrying. Then I'll wait at the edge of the woods." As he turned to leave, she spoke again. "What does the Count want with me?" Cassian hesitated, the question too direct. "I don't ask why, only how far." That's a soldier's way of saying he doesn't trust his orders. He glanced over his shoulder. And that's a fugitive's way of saying she has something to hide. The way she looked at him then, unflinching, almost amused, unsettled him more than he cared to admit. By dusk, they were riding through the forest road. The last light of the sun threaded through the trees, turning the mist gold. She rode behind him, silent except for the occasional rustle of her cloak. Cassian tried not to look back, but he could feel her eyes on him, studying him like one might study a stranger who might become a threat. Or something else entirely. When they stopped for the night, she sat near the fire, legs folded neatly beneath her dress. The glow of the flames traced the line of her face. Sharp cheekbones, soft lips, eyes reflecting green and gold. She looked ethereal and heartbreakingly human at the same time. Cassian kept his distance. He was trained for discipline, not curiosity, but the quiet between them had weight, like a question that refused to be spoken. "Why do you serve him?" she asked finally. "Because he saved my life." "Then you owe him." Cassian stirred the fire with the tip of his sword. "Don't you?" Her expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. The faintest crack in her composure. "I owe no one," she said too quickly. For a heartbeat, Cassian saw something flicker behind her calm. Not defiance, but fear. He wanted to ask what she was running from, who she really was. But he swallowed the words. Some truths he knew had sharp edges, and she didn't look like someone who bled easily. As the night deepened, she turned away, her hair catching the firelight like threads of silver. Cassian watched the embers fade, his thoughts a quiet storm. The Count had told him this mission was simple. Escort the girl, protect her, deliver her unharmed. But nothing about her, or the way his pulse reacted to her voice, felt simple anymore. Beneath the iron sky, he took his first watch. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't close his eyes once. The forest thickened as they rode east. Branches clawed at their cloaks and the smell of damp earth clung to the air. Cassian's horse moved steady and silent, trained for terrain like this. Elena's, however, tossed its head often, unsettled by the strange hush that hung over the woods. "Niwi," Silence wasn't natural. Cassian had been a soldier long enough to know when a forest was listening. "Keep close," he said over his shoulder. Elena's voice came low. "Something's following us." He didn't answer, because she was right. In the shadows behind them, he caught faint movement. The rhythm of padded feet, light and deliberate. Wolves, maybe, or worse. He pulled the reins, slowing his horse. "Dismount!" Before she could argue, he was already off his horse, unsheathing his sword. The faint ring of steel broke the stillness. Elena slid off her saddle quietly, her breath steady despite the fear she must have felt. She stayed behind him, her hand brushing against her cloak, ready to reach for that hidden dagger again. Cassian took a slow step forward. His voice was calm. "Whoever you are, step out." A low growl answered. Then, from between the trees, 3 shapes emerged. Wolves, black as night, their eyes burning faintly blue. Their ribs showed through their fur, but their movements were fluid, too coordinated, not wild beasts. Enchanted. Controlled. Elena's fingers tightened on his cloak. "They're bound," she whispered. He didn't ask how she knew. "Stay behind me!" The first wolf lunged. Cassian pivoted fast, blade flashing in an arc of silver. The creature yelped and fell, but another leapt over it, jaws snapping at his arm. He shoved it back, steel slicing through air. The third one darted around him, heading straight for Elena. "Cassian!" He turned just in time to see her lift her hand. Not the dagger, just her hand. The air shuddered. For an instant, everything froze. The wolf mid-lunge, Cassian's heartbeat, even the wind. Then a burst of light flared from her palm, white and soundless. When it faded, the wolf lay still, smoke rising faintly from its fur. Cassian stood motionless, his sword lowered. His breath clouded the air. "What did you just do?" Elena's face was pale. I don't know, but she did know. He could see it in the way she looked at her hand, as if it had betrayed her. He stepped closer, his voice quiet but sharp. "You froze it. You burned it alive without fire." Her eyes met his, defiant, scared, guilty all at once. "Then you saw nothing." Cassian's jaw tightened. "That's not how this works." "Then what?" She snapped. "You'll drag me to your count like a prize? Tell him what I am?" He held her stare for a long moment. The truth was, he didn't know what she was. He only knew she wasn't ordinary, and that terrified him more than the wolves ever could. He finally sheathed his blade. "I'm not here to turn you in. My orders are to keep you alive. Until when? Until he says otherwise." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Then my life isn't mine at all." She turned away, walking back toward her horse. Cassian watched her go, the tension between them raw and wordless. When he glanced at the wolves' bodies again, the blue glow in their eyes was fading, and carved faintly into their hides was a mark he recognized, the sigil of the royal bloodline. He felt something cold settle in his chest. Whoever Elena Wynne really was. The kingdom wanted her silenced. By the time they reached the edge of the village, the sky had turned the color of dying embers. Cassian's cloak was soaked from the mist, his hands stiff from the ride. Elena, silent since the wolves, looked pale, her knuckles white around the reins. The inn they found was small and forgotten, a place travelers passed through when they wanted to stay unseen. Its sign, a cracked board painted with a silver cup, swayed in the wind. Cassian handed the stable boy 2 silver pieces and led Elena inside. The common room was dim, warm with the smell of burning pine. A few men sat near the hearth, their laughter low and rough. The innkeeper, a stout woman with braided gray hair, eyed them curiously. "Room for 2, Cassian said, laying down a coin. 2 rooms, Elena corrected, her tone sharp. Cassian's gaze didn't move from the innkeeper. 1, for safety. The woman nodded and took the coin without question. As they climbed the narrow stairs, Elena hissed under her breath. "You assume much, don't you?" "I assume someone's still tracking you," he murmured back. "And that it's easier to guard 1 door than 2. She glared at him but didn't argue. When they reached the room, he let her enter first. It was small, 1 bed, 1 chair, and a window that overlooked the dark forest beyond. "I'll take the floor," he said before she could speak. "I didn't ask you to. I didn't ask for permission." For a long moment, they stood in silence, her standing near the window, him by the door. The tension between them hung heavier than the rain outside. Elena finally broke it. "Back in the forest?" She hesitated. "You didn't tell anyone what I did. Why?" Cassian leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I said I'd protect you. That includes from your own secrets." She turned, studying him. "And if those secrets get you killed?" He almost smiled. "Then at least I'll die knowing what I was protecting." That silenced her. She turned back to the window, her reflection faint against the glass. Soft and ghost-like. "Who taught you to fight like that?" She asked quietly. "My father," he said. "Before he became a count, he was a soldier. He thought every son should bleed before he could read. That sounds cruel. It was discipline. And discipline took his life from you, didn't it?" Cassian's jaw clenched. "You talk too much for someone who's running. And you talk too little for someone who's hiding," she shot back. For the first time, his composure cracked, a flicker of something raw in his expression. But before he could respond, a sound broke the moment, glass shattering downstairs. Cassian moved instantly, sword drawn. "Stay here." Elena caught his arm. "Don't," I said, "stay." He slipped out before she could stop him, boots silent on the stairs. The common room was half in shadow, the hearth dimmed, the laughter gone. Two men stood near the doorway, cloaked, faces hidden. Cassian didn't wait for them to speak. His sword was at the first man's throat before a breath passed. "Who sent you?" he asked. The man smirked. "You think she's the only one with secrets, soldier?" A flicker of movement, a knife flashed. Cassian dodged, struck, sent the man sprawling. The second tried to flee, but a blur of pale light struck the wall beside him. The wood hissed, burned, though there was no flame. Cassian turned. Elena stood on the stairs, her hand still raised, eyes bright like molten gold. The men fled into the rain. Cassian exhaled sharply. "I told you to stay." "I don't take orders," she said, stepping closer. "Not from the Count. Not from you." Her voice trembled slightly, but not from fear, from fury, and something deeper. He stared at her, the air between them charged. "Then what do you take?" Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Only what I choose." The storm outside roared as thunder rolled across the hills. Cassian lowered his sword. "Then choose to live, Elena." For a moment, neither moved. Then she turned away, retreating into the room. That night, he sat on the floor beside the door, sword resting on his knees. The rain drummed against the roof, the world quiet except for her breathing a few feet away. He told himself it was duty that kept him awake. But he knew better. Somewhere in the silence between them, something had begun. Fragile, forbidden, and impossible to ignore. The forest had thinned, but the chill of early dawn clung to the road. Mist hung low, curling around the wheels of fog rolling across the uneven path. Cassian rode ahead, dark cloak pressed tight to his lean frame, eyes scanning the tree line. Behind him, Wynne followed, the hem of her moss-green dress brushing the mud. Her long ash-blonde hair shivered in the wind, catching stray threads of sunlight as she rode. The road forced them close, narrow, twisting, uneven. At one point, Cassian slowed, letting her catch up. She fell into step beside him, her horse brushing against his. The proximity made his pulse do something he hadn't anticipated, a subtle tightening in his chest and stomach. "Elena," he murmured, not looking at her. "Don't let your attention wander." Her head tilted slightly, lips quirked with a wry smirk. "My attention never wanders. It's always fixed." He glanced at her, just for a moment, and caught her green eyes flecked with gold glinting in the sunlight. His throat went dry. He looked away, forward at the path, telling himself it was the wind. They rode in tense silence until a crackling sound made both of them freeze. A branch snapped, deliberate, somewhere in the undergrowth. Cassian dismounted instantly, sword in hand. Elena mirrored him, hand brushing the dagger hidden in her cloak. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low but sharp. "I thought you said to stay ahead," she murmured, moving closer to his side. His jaw tightened. She didn't need to, but she did anyway, and the brush of her shoulder against his just for a second sent a spark through him he couldn't name. A figure darted from the shadows, another hunter, cloaked, dagger glinting. Cassian moved fast, stepping between the man and Elena. His hand brushed hers as he grabbed her wrist, spinning her behind him instinctively. The contact was fleeting, but electric. Elena's breath hitched, and Cassian felt a tremor in his fingers as he released her just long enough to strike the intruder down. When the man hit the ground, she looked at him, eyes wide. That was close. "Too close," he said, voice rougher than intended. He cleared his throat. "You should not have stepped there." Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer than necessary. "And you should not have grabbed me like that." He met her stare, and for a heartbeat, the tension between them was unspoken but charged, heavier than any threat on the road. Their proximity, the lingering brush of their hands, the way their bodies had moved instinctively together, all of it screamed something neither wanted to acknowledge. Cassian exhaled, forcing the distraction away. "We need to keep moving." Elena adjusted her cloak, the movement slow, deliberate, and infuriatingly distracting. "Lead the way then, soldier." He walked ahead, sword still drawn, every step aware that her eyes followed him. Every step aware that the weight of her presence pressed against him, though they weren't touching. By mid-afternoon, the forest gave way to a narrow valley. The sun was higher now, but the shadows seemed to cling to them, whispering of unseen watchers. Cassian kept his hand near the hilt of his sword, but he also kept glancing at her, long enough to notice the way her dress clung to her as she rode, how her hair shimmered like spun silver, how the curve of her neck and the line of her jaw seemed impossibly delicate and sharp at once. "Elena," he said finally, voice lower than usual, "don't ride too close to the edge." She looked at him over her shoulder, a teasing smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "Or what? Or I'll have to make sure you survive by my own hands," he murmured. The words weren't meant to carry the weight they did, but they did anyway. Her chest rose slightly with a suppressed laugh. "You're very dramatic, Sir Drayke." "I'm very careful," he said, the edge of warning in his tone sharper than intended. Their eyes met for just a moment longer than safety allowed. Neither moved. The horses trotted steadily through the valley, unaware of the tension clinging to their riders like a second skin. By the time dusk approached, they had reached a small clearing. Cassian gestured to the remnants of an abandoned guard post. "We'll rest here for the night. Keep your weapon ready." Elena dismounted, brushing the dust from her dress, and for a brief second, their hands brushed again as she passed. Sparks, unspoken, electric, seemed to linger between them. Neither acknowledged it, but neither ignored it either. As they made a small fire and settled in for the night, the closeness forced by the night, the road and the dangers outside was inescapable. The air smelled of smoke and damp earth, and the firelight flickered across her face, highlighting high cheekbones and full lips, softening the sharpness of the day's tension. Cassian caught himself watching her, heart thundering, mind screaming that this was not duty, not discipline, something far more dangerous. Elena, for her part, sat a little closer than necessary, hair brushing against his shoulder, and allowed herself the smallest sigh of relief, not because the danger was gone, but because being near him, frustrating, infuriating, infuriatingly protective, made her feel safe, and neither could name the pull that had begun between them. The rain came without warning, slamming against the trees in torrents. Cassian's cloak offered little protection as he scrambled toward a hollowed cave at the edge of the valley. Elena followed close behind, the hem of her moss-green dress already soaked, her ash-blonde hair plastered to her face. "Inside, quickly," he barked, voice sharp against the roar of the storm. The cave was small and dark, barely wide enough for two. Cassian shoved his cloak to the side and gestured for her to enter first. She hesitated, brushing her wet hair back. Green eyes flecked with gold fixed on him. "You're very insistent on control," she said, her voice quiet but edged with challenge. "Survival requires control," he muttered, closing the narrow entrance behind them. The sound of rain became a deafening drum outside. They stood inches apart, the cave too narrow for comfort. Every brush of arms, every movement carried weight. Cassian's gaze drifted to her hair clinging to her shoulders, the soft curve of her neck, the tension in her posture, the way she was simultaneously defiant and vulnerable. "Cassian," she began, and he turned to look at her, sensing the softness behind her tone. "Do you ever just feel tired of all of this? Running, hiding, fighting?" He swallowed, his jaw tight. "I'm a soldier. Tired is a luxury I can't afford." Her lips curved in a faint, teasing smile. "Ah, the soldier's way. Always sharp, always in control. And the runaway's way," he countered, stepping slightly closer. "Always reckless. Always challenging." The brush of her sleeve against his arm, accidental perhaps, but electric, sent a spark up his spine. He clenched his jaw, trying to focus on the task at hand, keeping them both alive. The storm roared on, and Cassian moved to start a small fire near the cave's back, shoving a few wet logs together. Elena crouched across from him, water dripping from her hair onto the damp earth. "You should take the center," she said suddenly. "You're stronger." "And let you shiver?" he asked dryly, catching her hand as she shifted. Their fingers touched lightly. Neither moved away. "You're impossible," she whispered, though her eyes lingered on his. "And you're infuriating," he returned, voice low, almost a growl. The firelight reflected in his blue-gray eyes, making them seem darker, more dangerous. The tension between them grew heavier, unspoken and pressing. Every glance, every accidental touch carried a promise. Not of love yet, but of something far more dangerous. Desire tempered by control, a pull neither could resist. Elena's breath hitched slightly when Cassian's hand brushed against hers again while passing a log for the fire. Their eyes met, and the world outside, the storm, the wolves, the hunters, faded into background noise. For a long, charged moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled, the storm raged, and they were forced to acknowledge the undeniable pull, the heat of proximity, the brush of skin, the way the tension seemed to curl around them. Inescapable. Finally, Cassian broke the silence. "We survived this night," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "Then we move at first light." Elena nodded, though her gaze lingered on him longer than necessary. "I'll survive," she said, "if only because you keep me alive." And as the storm hammered the earth, both of them knew the night would be sleepless, for reasons beyond the rain. Dawn broke with a brittle gray light, the storm finally passing but leaving the earth slick with mud. Cassian and Elena mounted their horses again, the narrow road ahead cutting through a deep gorge, flanked by jagged cliffs. A rickety wooden bridge spanned a dark river below, groaning with every gust of wind that passed through the canyon. Cassian rode first, sword sheathed but hand resting near the hilt. His blue-gray eyes scanned every rock, every shadow. Behind him, Elena followed, the pale mist catching in her ash-blonde hair. She rode with a grace that belied the chill in the morning air, dress clinging slightly to her damp body, shoulders straight. Posture regal. "Careful on the bridge," he called over the wind, not looking back. "I can manage," she replied, voice tight but composed. The bridge swayed as they reached it. Wooden planks creaked and shifted beneath their horses' hooves. Cassian's heart thumped not from the danger of the river, but from the closeness of Elena behind him. The narrow space forced them within mere inches of each other, the scent of her hair and faint traces of pine and rain pressing into him. "Watch your step," he muttered, jaw tight. "I always watch my step," she said softly, her voice brushing against his ear in a way that made his pulse spike. Her horse nudged his, and the slightest touch of her arm against his side sent a jolt through him. He wanted to pull away, to remind himself of the duty that bound him. But instead, he pressed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her horse against the sudden sway of the bridge. Her green eyes, flecked with gold, met his. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. Her lips slightly parted, her hair damp against her face, his hand still resting on her shoulder. Then a shout rang out from the cliffs. "Stop them!" 2 figures leapt from the rocks above, cloaked, weapons glinting in the muted light. They moved with a practiced precision, clearly hunters sent to intercept. Cassian reacted instantly. One intruder swung a dagger at Elena. Without thinking, he pivoted, catching her horse between his body and hers, forcing her to freeze. Their bodies pressed together for a fraction of a second. Her warmth, her scent, the electricity of the moment impossible to ignore. Elena stiffened, but didn't move away. Instead, she twisted her wrist, dagger flashing from her sleeve. The other intruder stumbled back as the blade grazed his arm. Cassian moved again, sword flashing, keeping the attackers at bay. Every swing, every step, brought him perilously close to her. Each time their eyes met, unspoken words hung in the air. Frustration, admiration, desire, and a dangerous curiosity neither wanted to acknowledge. "You're reckless," he growled through gritted teeth, deflecting a dagger. "And you're infuriatingly controlling," she shot back, voice breathless, lips almost trembling. The bridge groaned under their combined weight and the shifting horses. One plank cracked. Cassian grabbed Elena's arm instinctively, pulling her toward him. Their bodies collided in the small space, pressing together to maintain balance. Her breath hitched sharply, her hand brushing against his chest. "You're heavier than I expected," he muttered, though his heart hammered for reasons he refused to name. She smirked, though her face was flushed, eyes bright. "You mean stronger than you expected." Another attacker lunged from the side. Cassian swung his sword, knocking the man back, but his other hand remained on Elena, steadying her. Their faces were inches apart now. He could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, the curve of her cheek catching the morning light, her lips parted slightly in focus and defiance. "Stay behind me," he barked, voice rough. "I'm not behind you," she hissed, though she stayed pressed against him, riding in the narrow space. The final attacker faltered, seeing the unexpected coordination of the pair. Elena flicked her dagger again, disarming him with a swift motion that left Cassian momentarily stunned. They reached the far side of the bridge, the attackers fleeing into the mist below. The bridge swayed violently behind them, groaning ominously. Cassian exhaled sharply, stepping off his horse. His hands trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the proximity of Elena moments ago. She dismounted gracefully, brushing mud from her dress, her green eyes meeting his. "You should have left me behind," she said quietly. "I should have done nothing," he said, tone low. And yet here we are, alive. They stood close, breathing hard, rain and sweat mixing with the dust of the road. The tension between them was unbearable, silent, charged, almost painful. Cassian wanted to reach for her, to touch her again, to see if the warmth and pull from before was real. Elena tilted her head, eyes never leaving his. "Alive doesn't mean safe," she whispered. "And yet," he said, voice husky, "I wouldn't trade this moment for anything else." Her lips quirked faintly, though she said nothing. The air between them was heavy, each unspoken word and stolen glance thick with possibility. Finally, Cassian sheathed his sword and looked at her fully, really seeing her for the first time on the road. Long, ash-blonde hair damp and tangled, moss-green dress clinging subtly, posture proud yet vulnerable, green eyes flecked with gold that seemed to pierce him. She met his gaze, chest rising, breath uneven. The space between them was tight, intimate and electric. "Next stop, shelter," he muttered, trying to break the spell of proximity. Elena didn't move away immediately, letting the silence linger, her expression unreadable. But when she finally stepped back, the air seemed charged. The storm outside had passed, but the storm between them had just begun. Night had fallen like a velvet curtain over the forest. The stars were thin slivers behind clouds, the moon barely illuminating the narrow path they traveled. Cassian led the way, alert to every sound, every whisper of leaves, every snap of a twig. Elena followed, her green eyes flecked with gold glowing faintly in the moonlight, long ash-blonde hair catching stray beams, moss-green dress flowing but clinging from the day's storms. Something's wrong, he muttered, voice tight.
Stay close.
Elena's horse nudged his, the slightest brush sending a shiver up his spine. He didn't move away. Instead, he felt the magnetic pull of her presence, intoxicating, impossible to ignore. Then, from the shadows, figures emerged. Armored men, cloaks dark as the night, weapons glinting. Cassian drew his sword in a fluid motion, muscles coiled and ready. Elena's dagger flashed at her side, white light emanating faintly from her palm. The first attacker lunged. Cassian intercepted, swinging his sword, moving like a predator. But another came from behind, too fast. Elena stepped forward instinctively, her hand brushing his, guiding him, deflecting the blade. Their movements intertwined seamlessly, bodies brushing, the electricity undeniable. After the last attacker fell, retreating into the dark, Cassian's chest heaved. Elena stood close, their foreheads almost touching, breath mingling. "You're hiding something," he said, voice low. "I am," she admitted, eyes dropping. "Something I've never told anyone." He searched her face. "Tell me." Elena took a deep breath, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not just a traveler, Cassian. I am of noble blood, magical blood, sent away as a child to keep me safe. That's why they're hunting me." Cassian's grip on his sword slackened, replaced with something heavier. Awe, disbelief, concern. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know if I could trust anyone," she said softly.
Not even you.
His blue-gray eyes softened, and he stepped closer, just enough that the heat of their bodies pressed against each other. The tension from weeks of travel, brushes with danger, and quiet nights of unspoken desire culminated in that moment. "You can trust me," he said, voice husky, low. "I promise to protect you. Nothing else matters." Her lips trembled slightly, green eyes shining with emotion. The air between them was thick, charged with months of frustration, longing, and fear. Without thinking, Cassian cupped her face, fingers brushing damp strands of hair from her cheeks. "Elena," he murmured. Her lips parted just slightly, inviting without permission, and he leaned in. Their kiss was electric, slow, intense, a collision of need, relief, and the fire that had been simmering between them for days. His hands rested on her waist, steadying her, and her hands curled into his shoulders, holding him close. The world outside the cave, the forest, the river, the dangers, disappeared. There was only the fire of their kiss, the sharp awareness of every brush of skin, every sigh, every unspoken word. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Cassian's forehead rested against hers. "I've wanted this," he admitted, voice low, almost pained. "So have I," she whispered, eyes closing, allowing herself the vulnerability she had denied for so long. They didn't need words. Each brush of hands, each lingering gaze, was a promise, a confession of all the tension, danger, and desire that had bound them together. Outside, the forest was silent. Inside, two souls had finally recognized each other, not just as protector and charge, not just as warrior and traveler, but as something far more intimate, fragile, and dangerous. Lovers bound by fate, secrets, and the shadows that had followed them all along. Cassian pressed another soft kiss to her temple, then to her lips again, slower this time, savoring every second. Elena melted into him, the tension of months dissipating in the warmth of trust and passion. And in that night, surrounded by shadows and the remnants of danger, a new chapter began, one of desire, love, and the undeniable pull that had always existed between the Count's son and the girl who had been sent away to keep her safe.
Subscribe to motivate me to write more. Comment what kind of story you want next. I read them all. See you guys in the next video. See ya.